I am about to start a new painting and I thought that I would show you guys my color mixing process. I am an abstract artist, so I tend not to follow all of the art rules and gimmicks, and color mixing is a very intuitive process for me, but there is some techniques and hacks and rules that I do consistently follow. Today, I don't know what I'm painting. I never know what I'm painting. I always go in without a plan, but I do always know what colors I want to use, which is one of the rules I always follow. I always know what color palette I want to do before I start painting. A painting that has too many colors is not going to be harmonious. Before you start painting, you should always know an idea of what colors you want to use, because having a color palette before you start painting is going to ensure that your painting looks harmonious. I've planned out not really the painting, but like the colors and some shapes and stuff I wanted to do. So the colors we're using today are light and dark blue. I wrote this like a week ago now, so I'm like, what, Maya? Tan cream, dark and light, some jade, dark green, medium reds, reddish oranges, and black and white. And we're starting with tan. First thing I do to set up, I always grab primary colors or some colors that I want to use in my painting. So I've got like red, magenta here, yellow, and blue. I don't have any more golden yellow, so we're using Liquitex for now. I also know that I want some green in my painting, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab the richest green that I can then change around and mix to get the greens that I want. That's what I would call your base color, the first color that you get that you're going to mutate and change into different colors, but they all come from this base color, and that could be any color that you want it to be. Since I already tend to know what colors I want to start with on my canvas, I go ahead and mix my base colors first. I do usually have my primary colors already on my canvas so that I can just scrape from them and mix colors together. By the way, I usually don't do any underpainting, so I know that's another art rule that I don't really follow. I don't really do any underpainting because I do so many layers in my pieces that I just don't really think it matters. So like I said, I usually have my primary colors on my palette before I even start mixing colors. But like I said, it's a very intuitive process for me, so I don't really do that anymore. You have to know the base rules and the basic things that you need to know in order to mix colors. And then once you have memorized that information, you can kind of just play around and go with whatever your heart desires from there. How I mix colors is called the cocktail. It is a self-coined term, and it means to put a bunch of base colors on your canvas. So right, these are base colors. So I've got like a primary yellow, Titan buff, some white, neutral gray, and burnt sienna. And I'm gonna use this to create a cocktail to create the base that I want, the color base that I want. Also, I mix colors with a palette knife. And I'm gonna show you, this is what I do. You take your colors that you wanna use and you use your palette knife and scrape some. So I grabbed a little bit of the white, I grabbed a little bit of the yellow. That was actually too much yellow, but that's okay. Grab some Titan buff, a little bit of burnt sienna, and some gray. That's called the cocktail. I'm mixing different things and putting them together, which is what mixing colors is. But what I see a lot of people do is they'll just put these base colors and then just put them together. Then you have like a big glob of the wrong color. This is why I mix this way, because it saves me paint, because this is going to be a lot smaller than if I had just put out a whole glob of all of these colors and then it wasn't the color that I wanted. So I take a little bit of each base color so that they last longer on my palette. Also, you can use mediums to make your paints last longer and keep them wet. I don't use mediums. I am gonna get some glycerin and I'm gonna use that, but most of the time I don't use any mediums, and I actually do have painting mediums that I never use. So then I just mix these colors together, and say that this wasn't the color that I wanted. It's not that much paint, and I can continue to mix more colors, versus if I had used all of these and then I would have had to pour out a whole new glob of paint. And when you mix colors with your palette knife, make sure you're doing this, because there's paint layers in your palette knife that are gonna come out when you put the palette knife on the canvas if you do that, or with your brush. because all of the paint has been mixed in. Another technique I use is, you see how I've mixed these colors, but on the back end here, I've added some white to get a lighter version. So now I have a shade and a lighter shade, and I mix them both at the same time so that I can make sure that the shade color is the most accurate darker version of the light color. I love doing this because it saves paint, but also it's the most easiest way to do it because you're not going to be able to remember how much ratio of each color you put. So this saves you time and saves you paint. When I'm in the process of mixing these colors, I'm always thinking about what I could be adding to colors to make them a different shade. And that goes into the base rules and techniques that I always follow. So let me tell you what they are. Start mixing accurate colors and getting the perfect shades and getting a harmonious color palette. You need to know the rules of colors. There are some rules that you just have to follow, and then the rest of them you can kind of dilly-dally. The first important rule to remember is what hues mixed with what. That's obviously the most important thing. Yellow and blue make green. Red and white make a lighter version of red, which would be pink. Red and yellow make orange. Blue and red make purple, things like that. You need to know what colors mix into what to make what colors. Another layer to that is the fact that you might have colors or shades that are different undertones, and those undertones will create a different type of that color. For examples, this red and this red are both red, but they have different undertones. This red has a more orangey undertone. It's a very orangey red. This red is a more cool toned red. Mixing these two colors, these two reds with the same blue, will result in a different purple because they're two different undertones. So that's another important factor in that. It's not just the hues, but also their undertones. Because every type of paint has a different process that it was made with, so the pigments are going to be different from each other, even if it's red and red. You got pythol red, naphthol blue, cerulean. I don't even know how to pronounce most of these things. I just know that they have different undertones, and that's all you need to know. So knowing the hues, the basic colors on the color wheel, the color spectrum, are important and how they mix into each other. Another rule I always follow is color temperature, and this goes into picking a color palette. Do I want a cool color palette or do I want a warm color palette? The type of hues that I use are going to matter in that because, like I said, they have different undertones, as well as picking a cool color and mixing them with a bunch of warm colors. Unless you have a plan for how it's going to go on your canvas, which you absolutely could, it can look unharmonious because they're two different color temperatures. So I always make sure that all of my temperatures of color are kind of the same. I'm gonna use this painting as an example. This painting I did a while ago is an example of a cool tone color palette. As you can see, I still did use some warm colors in this, but because the majority of the colors are cool toned, it is a harmonious palette. And the warm colors that I used, I actually diluted them. Or another word for it would be muting them with their contemporary color, which is the next thing we're gonna talk about. But before we talk about that, I just wanted to show you another example of a painting I did a while ago. It is a warm toned palette. It's harmonious because the colors are the same in temperature. So even if I put like a speckle of a cool tone on it, like this white might be a cooler toned white, it would still look good because the harmoniousness of the colors is relatively the same. So that's an important rule I always follow. Warm, cool, or somewhat in the middle. The most important rule that I always follow, more important than the things that I said, is how to get those hues that you mix to different shades. Because another factor in a harmonious color palette is you putting the wrong types of shades of color over the layers you've already put. And I've made this mistake before where I was mixing colors, but the shades were not harmonious with the shades that I put on there, even though they were in the same color temperature and they might have been the same color. To make sure that I am able to change the shades of the hues that I mix and play with them and get the most accurate color to the color that I want, I use a little bit of intuition and the color wheel. It's funny that I say that blue and yellow make green because my favorite color book is this book called Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green. And I love this book because it talks about the undertones, it talks about shades, it talks about everything that I'm talking about in this video. And I use all the different color wheels in this book because there's different color wheels that represent all of the different shades and undertones. Shades of green, shades of green. But this is the color wheel that I use. That's why there's paint all over this page. It is the page that's open the most. And I use this color wheel. It has a multitude of different shades in it. And I feel like it's just the most accurate one in the book to the color palettes that I normally use. So when I get confused or when I don't know where I want to go next with a color or what colors I need to mix with this color to get to the color that I want to be at, I always, always, always utilize the color wheel. The color wheel is going to be your best friend. If you have your like studio space, you should put a picture of your color wheel up on the wall so you can always reference it. So here are some methods I use to manipulate the shades of my colors to make them lighter or muted or darker. To get darker shades, I use the contemporary hue of the color that I mixed, or black or brown or gray. If you don't know what contemporary colors are the opposite of the color on the color wheel. So say that you're using a red color and you want it to be more muted or darker, you would use green because green is red's contemporary color. It's the opposite color on the color wheel to red. Both of the methods that I shared can be utilized, but the times that they're utilized and the different effects that they make do vary. I only use black when I want to make something like significantly darker and I'm okay with losing some of that color because black will pull the chroma out of the color and you will lose some of its vibrancy. It will make it very dull and sometimes that's not the look you're going for. Sometimes you just want to mute a color but you want to keep its vibrancy, you want to keep its chroma, but you just want to mute the color a little bit. So in that case, I would add the green to the red and make a darker, more muted shade of red. And I do this when I want a balanced color palette and I want all of them to be like kind of muted. I will add contemporary colors to every single color that I mixed. And that ensures that the color palette is muted all around and it also has harmonious colors. So that's just another layer of harmony that's going to make the painting stronger. To make colors lighter, I use white or cream, or I add the lighter color of the shade that I mixed. So for example, if I mix orange and it's too dark or too red, I mix in more yellow, which will make it brighter and it will make it a more yellower orange. Or if I like the shade of orange that I mixed, but I want it to be just a little bit lighter, but I don't want the hue to change on the spectrum, I will just add white and that will make it brighter without making it redder or yellower. Either method I would use at a certain time depending on what the painting needs, but those are the two methods that I use. I also already said this earlier, but I always make like a lighter and darker version of each color. For example, here I have the brown and then like a medium brown and then a lighter brown. I always do this. Currently, this is the color palette that I'm working with. Got some like earthy tones, and as you can see, I do have some warm tones in there that I've muted down with contemporary colors. And right now we're in the beginning phases, so I'm just gonna be seeing if all these colors work together and more layers to come after that. Something else that I do that I did not mention was to put color swatches in my sketchbook so that I can refer back to them when I work on future paintings if I liked a painting that was in an older painting. And I also do this to see if my colors are harmonious with each other. And I think that they work. So that's another tip for you. Also, to change the opaqueness of a color, I like to add cream to it or water to like desaturate it and like make it less opaque, which is apparently a no-no in the art world. You're not supposed to water down your paint, but it gives me the effects that I want and the saturation or opaqueness that I want, so I do it anyway. And like you can still see some of the white under the canvas, which is what I want. So that's how I do that. To change like the saturation, I just mix black or gray to the color. This is how I approach colors before and while painting. I tweak sometimes, I do different things, but overall, this is my process. I hope that this helped you in your practice or inspired you in any way. Leave any questions you have or like video requests or anything down below. I would love to chat with you. Thank y'all for arting with me. Just a little play abstract piece. And I'll see you next time. Look at my hands. They're just about to get dirtier. Joy to the world. All the boys and girls now. Joy to the fishes in the deep blue sea. Joy to you and me.